Fantasy sports coaches, welcome back to GameDay Squad's YouTube channel. Why I have you all here today is go through our 2024 forwards rankings for Aussie Rules. I have brought on special guest Jaiden Popowski today to join me to go through our top 20s. Jaiden, mate, it has been a while since you've been on the channel, but I'm glad to have you back. Are you ready to rip into this session?
Yeah, certainly, Tom. Thanks for having me back. And yeah, I'm pretty keen for this. Trying to get my head around the forwards and, you know, who's come out on top.
Yes, and I had a little note here to talk about before we got into the rankings. Jaiden, I personally think that the forwards are the most important position to pick this year just because of the score discrepancies that you can see. So just for a little knowledge for people who are starting up or maybe are new to the fantasy scene, the most two important considerations when we're picking our forwards today are going to be forwards that kick a bag of goals and also forwards who get midfield time, because more commonly they're going to be in the midfield racking up fantasy points. And just to back up that last point that I had, I went through some of the numbers in 2023 in GameDay Squad, and let me tell you some of the top forwards we had. We had Errol Goulden, Tim Taranto, Josh Dunkley, Connor Rozee, Zach Butters, that list goes on. And of course, all these players are now in the midfield for this season, but I'm sure you get the point. It's very important to have midfield minutes and to identify those type of players. But without further ado, Jaiden, let's get right into this. Let's reveal our 20 to 16 forwards for the season. We'll quickly have a look at each other's rankings and then let's have a chat about some players. So you ready, mate?
Sure am. Let's go.
Alrighty, you have a look at mine, I'll have a look at yours, and then let's have a chat. Baker, Gresham, Rankine, Tex. Alrighty. I might open the floor to you, Jaiden. Is there anyone in particular that you want to talk about in this ranks here? Just go for it.
Alright, I think for me it was important to have Nat Fyfe there. I'm pretty sure he's going to be, you know, up around that 80 mark potentially. So he could be someone that you look for consistency and, like you mentioned, someone who can actually play in the midfield. So he's there for me at number 16.
Yep.
So I think like he's going to be an important card to have just in case he goes well.
Yeah, 100%. It is Nat Fyfe, man. When he's on, we know how good he can be. It's just that how much midfield time will he have and how good can he be when he is resting in the forward line and how many points can he score. I actually might talk about a particular player here, Jaiden, because I think that unlike others, I rank this guy quite low, and that's going to be Joshua Rachele. I might quickly talk about him and then get your personal thoughts because I haven't gone through your list. I'm not sure, first of all, if he is ranked or where he is. I'll be interested to see it later. But mate, Josh Rachele, first of all, 20 years old, 84.3 fantasy average per game from 2023. As I said, I reckon I have him a bit lower than the regular fantasy coach, but I have a lot of concerns in regards to Rachele's role heading into 2024. And secondly, how consistent is he going to be at producing his fantasy points? I don't want a trial game to determine a player's season because I don't want to overreact, but, you know, I just think I looked at this trial game on the weekend. Isaac Rankine looked like that he was the forward that he's going to get the midfield time. He's going to get the CBAs. He's going to get that constant rotation. And I think personally, if that is the case, that's just going to limit Rachele's potential due to that factor. And if you look at his numbers from 2023, they're not like outstanding. We got 9.7 kicks, 5.6 handballs, and 1.1 goals per game. So for me personally, I see much of the same for him. Where I can see someone like Rachele climbing up my list is that he is only 20 years old. If we do this list again in 2 to 3 years' time, I have a feeling he would be in a much different position for me personally. He's on a really talented Crows team. So, you know, there's a lot of mouths to feed there. There are a lot of star players. So it's not a credit to him as a player. I think it's just the time and the opportunity to use someone like Rachele in your fantasy team isn't now. But hang in tight, sit back, because I do think we're going to see him become a very fantasy relevant player. I just don't think 2024 is the year for that to happen.
Yeah, great points. I think that's exactly why I have Rankine there at the moment instead of Rachele. He just has that bit more, like experience and dynamic midfield impact. I think for
Yes.
Rachele last year he got a bit of midfield time and he was going all right. But the problem for him is, and some of the analysis I've done in this preseason, is the fact that he can't score without midfield time. So there's some players that can do well in another role, and then if they move into the midfield, they do well in that as well. So that's pretty typical for defenders who move from defence, like Jordan Dawson last year. He scored well as a defender. He moves into the midfield and also scores well. So he has that kind of ability to do multiple roles. But with Rachele, it was midfield or bust last year.
Wow, which I think makes that point even more significant because, when he is in the forward line, if he's playing more minutes there, how is he going to score? Great points. But, mate, I think that sets us up quite nicely to start our video. What I think we should do, let's move on. Let's get to our 15 to 11. Let's head into our next range. 3, 2, 1. I'll pull it up on the screen. I'll give you a sec to have a look. And then let's have a chat about some of our rankings. Okay. Owen's nice. Yeah, right. Okay. Mate, I might give you the floor again. Is there anyone you want to touch on quickly here in this sort of rank? Who are you looking, or who has the upside for you this season?
Yeah. Well, in terms of my 5, I think I've gone for a bit more of a smoky perspective. Like who can be that card that you're going to need, who could start the season really well. And I've gone with that, with the kind of bit younger brigade of Fisher, McDonald and Owens. I think they could be, pushing around that top 10. Obviously at 11, 12 and 13 here, but especially with Fisher, his role will look really good. And like last year, when we had all those forwards playing midfield, often you're looking for forwards who are actually not in the forward line. So that's what I'm pretty keen on there. And I guess Hogan is also an interesting one for me because I think he can start the year pretty well. And like, if he can do that against some easier matchups, maybe that sets him up for a better year. I know GWS are pretty touted to have a pretty good year this year. They're the highly rated team. And I think, after last year, we've seen what Hogan can do up front. I think he scored 200 in GameDay Squad 1 week. So absolutely. I'm pretty keen on his prospects, especially to start the year. But I'll pass it over to you. I'm pretty interested in Taylor Adams here. I thought he might have been a bit higher for you, to be honest. When I was making mine, I had it in mind, where's Tom going to put Adams? So I'm surprised to see him here at 15.
Yeah, and then 13 for Heaney. So I've tried to take my Swans goggles off. The only reason I don't have Adams higher, I think, is just an age thing. He's 30 years old, 89.5 fantasy points per game. Of course, I do want these to be Dynasty rankings, but I did also put good consideration into the win now element. Just Adams is on the edge of a potential, significant decrease in terms of fantasy output. Do I think that'll happen this year? Absolutely not. Adams, I think he gets to around the 100 fantasy score average per game from last year. He had 89.5 in a Collingwood team that was absolutely stacked. He's come to Sydney for a reason. He wants this role where he's going to be in the forward, rotating into the midfield, and I think he's going to solidify that down. Is he going to be a starter in the midfield? Probably not, but that rotation is going to be tasty. It's going to be there all year, and, I just think you got the players like the Isaac Heaney's I just mentioned. He looks like he's going to become a full-time forward. When he first entered the AFL, he's that forward midfield type prospect, someone who would come in, be able to play both roles. But I just think with what the Swans need this year is they need a goal kicker, no more Lance Franklin anymore. They've got a lot of young, big guys in our forward line, McDonald, Marty, now Heaney. I think he's just going to be full-time. It's going to open the door for someone like Adams to come in and just eat in terms of fantasy production. So, as I said, only reason he isn't higher is because of his age. But if you're looking at a win-now prospect and someone you want in your squad, 1,000% Taylor Adams is someone you need for sure. Mate, and I want to talk about the back of your point you mentioned before. Like, you talked about Hogan. I actually personally didn't have Hogan in my list, but it's this... Someone like Hogan, someone like Tex. I think both of us had Tex in our 20 to 16 range. These are players that aren't going to be like a set and forget. And like, you know, if you're in a draft league, you're probably a little bit more. Charlie Curno's in my list here as well. Let's add him to that list. These are players that you're not going to be wanting to start week in and week out, but there are going to be matchups throughout the season, like Tex did last year against West Coast, like Hogan did, where they're just going to score an absolute bag of goals and they're going to be better than every other forward in that round. So I love the fact that you've added Hogan and Tex as a part of your rankings, because if you look at it as the whole season and the average, I think it doesn't truly show the value that they have, especially in a platform like GameDay Squad, where you can sub week in and week out. So,
yeah,
man,
exactly right.
Yeah.
And another point on that is just the fact that, like, I know the forward line seems pretty rough this year. Like, we're coming off the best year for forwards that we've had in the last decade, and now we've got no forwards that did amazingly well for the first time in ever. So I think it's really important to understand that you want to be opening your weekly bronze cards just to get as many forwards as you possibly can. There isn't such a big gap between the top and, say, a mid-range forward, if that makes sense. So I don't think, like, there's clear top 5, there's clear top 6 that you want to be playing. I'd really recommend have the widest range of cards you could possibly have that you want to be playing, compared to last year where it was almost like you had your 6 and they were pretty much set. So it's going to be really important to have the kind of depth of cards to play, because the gap between the top and these middle players like Hogan isn't as big, and there will be weeks where you'll think it's going to be Hogan, or any of these forwards could easily be in your 6 starters. Like, we don't know at this point. And yeah, even people like Mitch Owens, like, he could just be a top 6 forward this year. We don't know. There's not much room that he has to improve to get up to that top. So yeah, my advice is just to get as many forwards as you can.
Mate, spot on advice as well. And it's just like the high upside players you spoke about. I want to quickly touch on one. You spoke about him before, Isaac Rankine. The funny thing about my list, and I've done a whole series now, this is the last episode and I've brought you on for this, but Adelaide Crows and the forwards, I have picked the most out of like any other list. Like, I've picked, I think, 4 to 5 Crows players in this list. So I think it's just very significant, and it just goes to show, like with what you're saying, is that there isn't just that one clear player that you need to stick with and you're going to be like, this is the guy I need to go with. I definitely agree with you need to have a diverse range. And again, I said we shouldn't talk about preseason games, but I'm going to go against my own rule and I'm going to do it. Rankine looked on fire. He's always been a sharp player. That's something we've known. But he just looks like he's ready to take a giant leap in 2024. He did have a consistent stream of CBA attendances throughout this trial game. And I think that's just the indication that he's gotten the nod this season to have a midfield role. He will still have the opportunity to kick a bag of goals in the forward line. I think 84.5 average in 2023 is going to be a good base for Rankine this season. My sort of question is how high can he take that average in 2024? He's 23 years old. He's a great dynasty prospect as well. But I think Rankine's just a card you're going to want to have in your team this year. He's someone that I'm going to be closely keeping an eye on, at least to start this season, because I'm just curious how much midfield time he's going to get and how well he's going to score when he is outside of the midfield as well.
Yeah, I don't think it's a bad idea to have this many Crows. Like, there's a lot of ball for them up there last year, so, and potentially more this year. So, and yes. I think you might have another one coming up right now.
Yeah, let's do it, mate. Let's flick over. Let's get to the pointy end, our top 10s, but more in particular, the 10 to 6 range here. Let's flick it on screen now so everyone can see. I'll go through yours, you go through mine, and let's have a quick chat about it. And wow, Dylan Moore comes in here at number 10 for you. Bolton at 6. Green. Toby Green at 8. Alrighty. Mate, is there anyone that you want to talk about in particular in this range?
I almost feel like the players that haven't come up for you yet are the players on my list, and vice versa as well. I guess just with Dylan Moore, I'm kind of thinking towards this year a lot more than the dynasty aspect, because as you know, everything changes within one pre-season and all your forwards go into midfield. But struck down with glandular fever, so I don't think he'll. I think it's really important to keep an eye on how he's looking on the transfer market, because if he's missing, say it goes 4 weeks and he's still not close to coming back, that's when you kind of want to be keeping an eye on the price that's going, because his price would probably be going down. You could get him for a really good bargain on the transfer market if he hasn't been playing, but you kind of need to do it before there's any rumour of him coming back. So I really recommend keeping an eye on that, because he is only 24, so you're going to have him for a lot more years, and he seems like a stay-at-home forward, so he won't be losing that status anytime soon. But for me, down pretty low, just from the fact he'll be missing a few weeks, and I would probably rather have the cards above him than him right now, if that makes sense.
Yeah, totally get it. And that's good. You put the win now aspect into it. Totally agree with that. I have Bailey Smith at number 9. Now, everyone's going to go, Tom, have you not heard the news? This guy's done his ACL in the preseason. I've heard it, all right? I understand. But I still think Bailey Smith, even with that news, this is a Dynasty Rankings list. He has to be a top 10 player in my eyes, because when he gets back, and when he's back to his best, if he's a forward in fantasy, I think he's top 3 for me. Now, I know it can be hard at times when players are coming off an ACL injury to get back into form, and there's usually a bit of growing pains. There's usually that year, a couple month period where, it's just not going so well. They're getting their body back, they're getting their legs back, but look, I don't think there's ever a good time to tear ACL, but if there was a time to do it for a player, it's the start of a preseason, because, with the way that ACLs rehab, the time period that it takes you to get back onto ground, to running again, get back to contact, he will perfectly align with the start of next preseason, and he's going to be able to have a full preseason to head into the season, which I think is a massive tick in my eyes. You're looking at Bailey Smith. Of course, you can't use him this year. There's no reason to go out and panic, get a card off Bailey Smith. But I just think it doesn't matter what happens this preseason. He's still top 10 for me, and you just have to have him in your rankings either way. Because if you do this next year and he has a good preseason and you're watching one trial game and you're like, Bailey Smith is back, I can guarantee he's going to shoot up into everyone's top 5s, because he's just that good of a player. Mate, I want to talk about one of my favourite players of all time, and one of the reasons why I still watch and love AFL. He's not a swan though. It's going to be Dustin Martin, 32-year-old, 106.6 fantasy average per game in 2023, aka Dusty, the king of the AFL for I can't tell you how many years. He's been terrorising players with his signature "Don't Argue" for what seems like forever. But as a forward, this year in 2024, I think Martin is primed to have another great year and continue his form from last season. Speaking of, his averages from last season: 14 kicks a game, 9.6 handballs, 4.7 marks, and got 1.3 goals, which I think is very significant and an area that he's improved in throughout his career as he's progressed. This is the most disposals from any forward that I've covered in this list so far. And I just think I love the idea of having Dustin Martin on my forward line this season. He's going to be someone that I'm putting in there. Triple-digit average is quite rare in this list. We'll see. Of course, these averages are going to change. It is a new year. But I'm just looking at his last season and thinking it's tasty, and I can't find a reason to not put him in my lineup as a win now player personally.
Yeah, very good. I think with Dusty, it is a bit of a case of people not noticing him as much because Richmond aren't as dominant anymore. So, but I don't think that's affected him at all. Just based on last year alone. Like, he
Yep.
almost was pushing for All-Australian selection if you just look at his stats alone. If you forget the name and just look at the stats, like, he probably would have been in a lot of people's teams, but just from the fact that Richmond aren't as good, like, he's probably someone that people aren't as keen on. But as you can see, he's not currently in my 5, so potentially he's still coming up. So I'm pretty keen on him this year, to be honest.
Mate, that's awesome. Well, I'm going to talk about a player now, and it's going to be Sam Flanders. I reckon you hold off, though, because I'm fairly certain Sam Flanders is going to have to be in your top 5, of course. We haven't seen him yet in your list, but 22 years old, 103.9 fantasy average per game in 2023. At the end of last season, Flanders had the AFL fantasy world in a bloody frenzy. He was ranked what felt like within the top 3 or forwards every other week. He was literally on fire. No pun intended, him being a son. His 2023 averages, I don't think, are a true reflection of his play overall through that period, so I won't go through them, but he was utilised, and how he was utilised in the last part of last season could be a sign to tell for what is coming up for him in the near future. I'm just seeing him, and I wanted to place him in my top 3, but I just have some suspicions and some worries on whether Flanders is truly going to be as good as he was over an entire season. And let's talk about what for me would be the elephant in the room. It's Damien Hardwick being appointed as the head coach of the Suns. I know he has a history of containing fantasy scores within forwards. I still think Flanders is going to be good, which is why I have him in my top 10 and why I have him placed where he is. I just can't place him into that elite tier of forwards yet. I really do hope he proves me wrong. And honestly, this is probably the one player that I looked at my list and I'm like, this could come back to bite me. People are going to play this clip and be like, you are an idiot for saying that Flanders wasn't a top 5 forward. But for now, I'm going to stick to my guns. I think he's going to be really good. He's a great dynasty option. I have him at 6, so he's not that far out of my top 5 anyway. But yeah, I just think that's going to be an unpopular opinion. And I'm keen to see how that's going to play out, of course. But I reckon without further ado, because I've left it on a bit of a cliffhanger, I want you to get in to our top 5 and more particular Sam Flanders and the season that he is going to have. Let's flick it over. And oh my goodness.
There he is.
Take it away. Number 1 ranked player for Jaiden in 2024, Sam Flanders. Mate, what year do you think that he is about to have?
Like, yeah, as soon as I made these rankings, like, it was the easiest decision. Even tossing up number 2 is a bit tricky, but number 1 for me, no doubt about it. I think just in terms of some of the stuff I've looked at, so if you look at where like the marks were taken last year, Gold Coast had quite a lot of marks in there, like behind the centre square. Just looking at like heat map for the season. But then if you look at the Richmond game style, the marks are everywhere on the ground. They don't keep it in any position. They just move it on, get it up the field. And I think that benefits Flanders. If they go for this faster system, it means like, you know, these midfielders running back typically haven't averaged as much in the Richmond transition system. But what it means is there's a bit more spread around the ground. And someone like Flanders brings something different to that midfield where we saw last year, especially in the final game, he was just everywhere. He was popping up for marks, goals. I think he have like 100 at half time? I'm not sure. Probably something like that. And yeah, I'm just so keen on him this year, like up at number 1. And especially as we'll be playing round 0, he's going to want to be someone that you have. And to be honest, I haven't looked at the market, but I'm pretty confident that Flanders would be up there as one of the most expensive forwards right now.
Mate, I can tell you what, from our Discord, he is definitely the most sought after card. People are asking for Sam Flanders everywhere. Who has a bronze Sam Flanders? Who has I need it for my forward line? So you're right. You're spot on. But mate, I want to talk about who I think could be like one of the most underrated players firstly, and then someone that's a little bit different on my list, but I just think that he's going to be the biggest standout in 2023. But I'll start with the first. It's Caleb Daniel. 27 years old, 104.4 fantasy average per game in 2023. Just me personally, he just goes so far under the radar. I think all the talk this preseason is that Jack Macrae is about to take the next step. He's going to be amazing, which I don't disagree with. I do think Jack Macrae is going to have a good year, and especially when you look at all the forwards, he's going to be a card that you're going to want to have. But I just don't think he's that much better than Caleb Daniel. I would like to hear your opinion on it, Jaiden, but I just think if you put the two head-to-head right now, Macrae's 30, Daniel's 27, and even if you take the dynasty aspect of it, you just go win now. If you look at the stats from last year, I just don't see why people would have Jack Macrae that much higher than Caleb Daniel, and I've literally just had them one after the other in my rankings. I think they're both in for a great year. 100 fantasy points per game should be a bit of a flaw for both of them, and I'd like to see how much more that can get. But mate, what's your thoughts on that situation between the two?
Yeah, as you can see, I do have them around the other way, and by a fair distance. So I think Daniel will be pretty solid as the number 2, but the reasoning for that is mainly due to the Dogs not having so much outside options around that midfield, and he seems to be that one that can get involved coming out of the midfield, running off half-back or half-forward. He's going to be that first kind of option they look out to, and for good reason as well. He's a great user.
Yep.
And yeah, in GameDay Squad where you get that boost for kicking the ball, I think his kicking, no matter how short it is, you can get that boost just from that. So that's why I'm pretty keen on Daniel. And then for Macrae, he's quite a popular player this season purely because of his forward status, but I don't think that really means we should be overly confident in him, especially in some of the salary cap formats of the game. In this, it's a bit different because you can just pick him and put him there, but I don't really see him getting any better than what he was last year. Since he was amazing 3 years ago now, he's just dropped off every year, and that comes from his transition ball. Everyone talks about Bevo and getting Macrae out of the midfield, but his stoppage numbers don't really make up that much of the difference. It's actually his outside transition, and if you look back to the start of his career, he wasn't getting centre bounces and he was averaging 100 with ease. So it's that outside ball that's dropped off for him. That's not really to do with his role at all. His role and his scoring is just random. There's no correlation at all. So for Macrae, I think the drop-off has just started, and he doesn't have that same outside impact anymore, which is why I'm a bit more keen on Daniel to make up that difference.
Mate, I bloody love that. Yeah, I almost wanted to put Daniel in front, but last minute I thought, okay, Macrae maybe this year will have a little bit of a better season, but I think, long term, I'm going in with Daniel as well. But I love that you just went for your guns. You've got Flanders, Daniel, Dusty, Adams as well. Wow. I can't... You were saying that you thought that I was going to have Big Taylor Adams high. You have him so high. Do you look at Taylor Adams right now? And I don't want to use the term set and forget, because I don't think you should set and forget players ever. You definitely should be looking at matchups, good rounds, and what's going on in the league. But is he someone that you could see entering that sort of range this year in 2024?
Yeah, definitely. I think he was, decently close last year? A little bit, not really, but I think your list is a bit more related to that actual average than mine. But yeah, with Adams, especially with I guess in recent days, Luke Parker going down, it just gives me that confidence to rate him a bit higher, purely from the fact that if he starts the season well, while Mills and Parker are out, he's going to be someone you want straight away. There's going to be players that pop their heads up. There's going to be top 6 potential, like Flanders last year, that just come out of nowhere, and you can replace Adams with someone like that very easily. But for the start of the season, there's not a lot that I have much more confidence in than him, when there's not the same amount of midfield calibre around him.
Yeah.
They've clearly traded him in with a reasoning. He wasn't playing midfield at Collingwood, and even if he just gets that small bump, I think it will be really beneficial for him. he's always been that kind of midfielder. He's been thrown around everywhere, defence, forward, but his best years have come as a midfielder. And,
Yes.
you know, if pairing out with Brodie Grundy, maybe that will help him out a bit. But yeah, I'm pretty keen on having him up pretty high, especially to start the year, because that's kind of what it's more about for me. How likely are these guys to be in the whole season? There's going to be players that pop their heads up, but for now, he's very good.
Mate, I bloody love it. Let's go. Last player, at least that I want to touch on, in particular, is Shai Bolton. This is someone that I nearly wanted to rank at the number 1 spot, but refrained away from doing. 25 years old, 103.8 fantasy average per game. New coach, no worries for me. I think Shai Bolton's about to explode in terms of fantasy score this year, and I just want to quickly give some insight into why. Now, out of all of the current forwards, his 2023 average would have had him ranked 4th over the whole year. Now, I know that doesn't consider people that have moved clubs, like you're saying, like Adams as well. He's probably going to enter into that discussion, into that range. But his stats from last year, 13.7 kicks, 8 handballs, and 1.3 goals a game. Dusty's getting a little older. Is it time for someone else to step up? I hope so, and I think so as well. We saw, even in games last year, Bolton would take over a game for the Richmond Tigers. His just skill, his ball use, his speed, and his finishing ability. It's just a perfect combination for someone to become and take that next leap. He's ready to go. He's primed for a big 2024, and I think he's an absolute must-have in your squad. If you don't have Bolton this season in your game day squad, I think it's big trouble. Big trouble. I'm honestly considering even playing up to a gold for Bolton in some weeks this season. That's the sort of level I have him. Is he going to be a consistent 110 to 120 fantasy output player per week? Probably not, but there are going to be some matchups and there are going to be some games where I'm going to want that extra multiplier on someone like Shai Bolton, and I am that high on him. I can't wait for the season that he's about to have. I think he's going to be insane.
Yeah, I really like that pick as well. I had him in the top 6, so he is going to be someone that I want on my field as well. And yeah, I agree with your points about his impact. He impacts at stoppages and also around the ground as well, even without so much midfield time. It's just that impact that he has. It's kind of like Rachele, but imagine Bolton gets involved around the ground as well. It's just a great starting point for a forward to have. And yeah, even if he doesn't get an increase in midfield time, like he averaged 104 last year, so that's going to be good enough.
100%. Like if that's your floor, it's a pretty good floor to go off, and with the potential to get more midfield time, to score more fantasy points, I think it's fantastic. And I had Toby Green rounding it off. This is a massive win now one for me. Look, he's 30. He's the captain of the Giants, though. I agree with your point before with you said in Hogan. I think the Giants are in for a massive season. I have them in my top 4 this year. I think they're about to explode, and it's going to start off with their captain, their guy, Toby Green. So I think he's in for another good year. I can't wait for Toby Green and what he's going to do. Jaiden, that's going to wrap us up, our top 20 forwards for the 2024 AFL season, mate. Thanks so much for coming on to the channel again to talk it through. You've been doing so much good work this pre-season. Just wanted to first of all give you a shout out, but second of all, give you the opportunity to let everyone know where they can find you and all the great things you do, mate.
Yeah, thanks, Tom. It was pretty fun. And yeah, I'm quite excited for the forwards this year, just from the fact that you're going to want to have some depth. Like I mentioned, you're just going to want these players because any of them could easily be top 6. There's not that massive gap to the top. So yeah, my advice, just get as many as you can because you never know. But yeah, you guys can find me. I'm mainly on Twitter at Jaiden_Popowski. And yeah, I've been doing some stuff on there, kind of getting more into the nitty gritty of the game and what's going on, like whether these forwards are getting more points from stoppages or more points around the ground. You probably heard me talk about that a little bit during this conversation, but yeah, that's kind of what I'm doing at the moment, trying to get better indicators for midfield time. So that's what it's all about.
Yeah, absolutely. And you can't find that stuff anywhere else. So I've got a link down below in the description to Jaiden's Twitter. Go give him a follow. Go look at all the content he does, because he will 100% get you ready for the season that is rapidly approaching. Mate, I can't wait to be watching footy again. But I thought I have you here before we wrap this up. I want some of your predictions for the upcoming season. I'm going to rapid fire some questions at you. First team, player, whatever it is that comes into mind. Now, this might be an easy one for you, just knowing yourself. Who's going to win the flag this year?
It's kind of funny saying like all the
Surprised
media
you
at the
haven't
moment.
said.
All the media rages at the moment is that Collingwood is so likely to go back to back. Well, yeah, I think they're more likely than any other team because there's only one team that can go back to back. So I guess I have to sit there. I have to. Like, there's no other way about it. I probably don't think they're the favourites, but you know, I've got to stick with them.
Yeah, absolutely. Fair enough as well. Mate, who is going to be the highest, or who's going to obtain the highest fantasy average in the 2024 season out of all player positions? Who's your number one?
I just have to go the first player that comes to mind, and I am very excited because I do have him in GameDay Squad. I did forget about this because he was injured to end the year, but when I logged in for the first time this year, I saw his name. I thought, oh, thank goodness I have him, and that's Nick Dacos.
And fair enough as well, because gosh, he nearly won a Brownlow playing half a season, as you said last year, which I think is an indication of how bloody good Nick Dacos is. I've got a couple more for you, mate. Which team is going to be the highest, or who's going to rise the highest this year out of all the teams? Is someone that didn't do so well last year that you see climbing up the ranks and maybe cracking into the 8?
Yeah, I haven't really thought about this. I think Adelaide is the popular answer, but I'm pretty keen on Sydney as well. Just for you, I think they can push the top 4, and they're always thereabouts. Like for the last however long, they're always up there. So I wouldn't be surprised to see them jump up into the top 4. And a few. This is just Pies themed, but there's a few Pies boys there now, so it will be exciting.
Yeah, that's like music to my ears, mate. Keep it coming. We can talk about this all day. And lastly, the team that's going to fall the most from last season, someone that's just going to fall off the cliff, it's all over. Who comes to mind?
It is hard. Like the first that comes to mind is St Kilda, and I know they've had a pretty good pre-season. Everyone seems to be talking them up, but and I guess it comes down to the question, and the same with Gold Coast. How much can the coach do on their own? Ross the Lion did very well last year, but just don't think they quite have the star power to be able to stay up where they are. So I think maybe they'll slide down a little bit. But coaching. If people think Gold Coast can rise up on the back of a coach, then there's no reason why Ross the Boss can stay in the 8. But yeah, that's my personal opinion anyway.
I bloody love it. There you have it. Our top 20 forward rankings for the 2024 season, and Jaiden's predictions coming up. Jaiden, thanks so much again for popping on the channel. Smash a like, subscribe, and we'll catch you all in our next one. See you, everyone.